There's one easy, quick way that you can become a healthier person today. In fact, some of you are probably already doing it. You want to be healthier starting tomorrow? Stop making your bed. It's true. It's true. You can Google it later, but it's a fact that those who don't make their bed are healthier people. And here's why. Because, I know this is going to sound gross, kick off our sermon with this morning, but is that there's bacteria from you onto your sheets. And then what happens when you make your bed, it's dark and it's tight, it gets a little bit warmer, and it multiplies as bacteria does. So leave that bed unmade. You'll be a healthier person because of it. You don't have to do it anymore, which will make you happier and healthier. It's going to be great. I've been doing it my whole life, and look at me. So, in fact, it was one of the most common conflicts that I had with my parents, and I tried to tell them. They don't listen to me, but I didn't like to make my bed, and it was really important to them that I made my bed, and for that and other reasons, they have let me know that I am not their favorite child. So, if you have your Bible, let's turn over to Genesis chapter 37, and we'll talk a little bit about favorite children today. My name is Cale Courtwright, the preaching minister here, and I'm so glad that you're here to worship with us today as we kick off our summer together. And thanks for participating, and for those who didn't, thank you for being here. So tonight we do want to invite you back at 5 o'clock, and those snow cones are the best snow cones you can have. I mean, all around the world here tonight. I'm not lying. I mean, it's true. It's a fact. We said it from the pulpit. It has to be true. So we're also going to have a lot of fun. Our church is blessed to be led by a great group of elders, and they will be leading us tonight as well. They'll be cooking our dinner for us tonight, and so we are thankful for them for that also. So I hope to see you tonight at 5 o'clock. We just wrapped up a series on 1 Thessalonians, and today we're going to kick off a new series studying the person of Joseph, and that we find in the back half of Genesis. Now, this coincides with VBS as well, so next week your kids or grandkids will start studying Joseph as well at VBS, so it's going to be a fun summer thinking about this man and what we can learn about our God through his story. Now, to set the scene for Joseph, though, his story starts in Genesis chapter 37, but like all of us, it starts before that. Because you do not arrive without the influence of your parents. And anyone who thinks they're independent, it's really hard to be your own person separated from who your parents were. And so before we go into Joseph, we need to talk a little bit about Jacob. Now, Jacob, his very name means deceiver. And he not only deceives people throughout his story, he is deceived in his story as well. But Jacob is one of those guys who the Old Testament refers to God as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But if you have a son, my guess is that you don't put a poster of Jacob on his wall and say, be like him. He does have some redeeming qualities, but that's not the person that I would want my sons to look up to. There's lots of characters in Scripture. He's one of them, but he's not necessarily one of the best ones. But this is the man, this is the father of our character, Joseph, and so we need to understand him a little bit. So one of his habitual sins or weaknesses is to deceive, is to lie. This is who he is. But it's also, something else he struggles with is favoritism. Now, through no fault of his own, he ends up married to two sisters, Leah and Rachel. He really only wanted to marry Rachel. And so because of that, he mistreats Leah, even if by the fact of favoring Rachel. And this has got to be a painful part of her story. And it even extends beyond them. He favors Rachel's children over Leah's children. And so this is the foundation of when Joseph steps onto the scene. So you cannot separate Joseph from his father Jacob. He is influencing what we see happen. So let's just start his story. Now Israel, let me stop for just 1 second, sorry. Jacob does wrestle with God, and because of that, he is renamed Israel. He's kind of a conflicting character because while he's not great, the entire body, all of God's people are going to be named after him. Now Israel that's Jacob, Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. So for a long time, I've joked with my parents that I wasn't their favorite child. I have 2 younger brothers, and, one parent likes one parent likes the other. This is just what I've joked for a long time. And they, of course, always deny it and things like that. But then one time I was at the grocery store, and I was looking at the magazines there next to me, and there was a Time magazine, not a tabloid, Time magazine. And the cover was something like, what your favorite child says about you. And so I bought the magazine, and I studied it intently to try to figure this out. And what it goes on to say is that most parents do have a favorite child. And what ends up happening is it's either your firstborn becomes your favorite. I'm a firstborn. It didn't work out for me. But either it's your firstborn or the child that you most easily relate to, the one that you see yourself in the most. And so whether it could be off of the way they look or their personality or something like that, that we kind of gravitate towards those people. Now, I have had my parents read this article, by the way. So needing to be right, also not a favorite kid trait. But what the article goes on to say is while most parents naturally relate easier, maybe naturally have a favorite child, good parents never let their kids know who it is. Good parents strive to not let their kids know who their favorite is. Jacob is not a good parent. This is what we see. Jacob has made it so apparent who his favorite child is that the rest of his kids no longer love this brother. They don't like him. It says they hate him. One of the things you see him do is Jacob showers gifts upon Joseph. Our text here says it's an ornate robe, but you may have thought of it as a coat of many colors. That's probably what you've heard of before if you know this story. The coat of many colors. I don't know what you picture, but I do picture something that's a little bit long, kind of like a robe, kind of like a coat, and it's just got lots of colors. Every time I saw it in a picture, like a picture Bible growing up, I always thought, I wouldn't even want that coat. Like, why are we jealous over the coat? We're jealous of the coat because of what the coat represents. The coat is a gift from their father. And it sets him apart. In fact, he's not the oldest son. In fact, he's closer to the end of the line, except this coat signifies that this one will become primary. This will become the son that will lead us. This will become the son that it's all about. And so it's not necessarily that it's the gift, though I think that's part of it. It's that this son is the future. It's about favoritism. And so Joseph has this coat, and what we'll see is that it's something that he wears all the time. Maybe you've received a gift from a parent before, and you wear it, whether it's jewelry or something else. But this is something that becomes core to who he is. I'm the brother with the coat or the robe, and all that represents. So if favoritism is the foundation, here's the inciting incident of Joseph's story that will kick off his entire story. Joseph had a dream, verse 5, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous, but his father kept the matter in mind. So as I read that story, I'm not saying that Joseph is dumb, but he kind of seems dumb, right? Because anyone that has been raised with siblings, you kind of just learn how to navigate. You learn the things to do or not to do. Anyone that had gone to public school wouldn't do this, right? Just because of how it comes across. How do you think your older brothers are going to respond when you tell them this dream? He's obviously not maybe the smartest guy. But what we've just seen here is the main theme of Joseph's story. It's the dream versus the dream killers. Joseph has a dream. And what you might see is that every step of the way is there's going to be obstacles to his story. There are going to be people that will try and stop it, or that through their own negligence will try and stop it. And so Joseph has this dream, and it's what we as the reader will see is, will this dream come to fruition? Will it happen? Now, what you are going to start to understand is that this dream is a gift from God, that this dream is given from God. However, what we just read doesn't say that. What you read here in Genesis 37 is just that he had a dream. But you and I, as we read it, and what the biblical text wants you to know is that as we come to understand it, is that this is a gift from God. And so the question behind that then is whether or not, it's not just whether Joseph's dream will come true, it's whether God's dream for Joseph will come true. And those are pretty different. Because you might have a dream, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's God's dream. This is a gift, this is a dream given to Joseph by God. So, the story, we're going to flash forward a minute here. This story may actually sound very familiar to you, especially if you've been around church a little bit. But Joseph's brothers go out to shepherd the flock. They go out to the fields. And Jacob sends Joseph, and he says, go and check on your brothers and report back how things are going. Well, the brothers had taken the flocks from one location, and they'd had to move to another location. So where Joseph was told to go is not actually where they were. And this becomes quite significant, because he will go and find his brothers, but they are not where anyone expects them to be. They're not where the father expects them to be. So what that means is that they can get away with something. And this story should give you echoes of David's story, because David will go out and check on his brothers. David's not with his brothers later on in the Old Testament. And we know why, because David is a lot younger. He's not ready to go out to war. They're out to war. And David just goes and checks on them for the father. So that should beg a question, though, for us, is why is Joseph not with his brothers? They are somewhere else. Why did he not go with them? Is it just that he's too young? You might think that, though he is old enough to go and search for them and check on them. Is it that he's just not meant to work? That Jacob is already prioritizing him? Let them go out with the flocks. You are the chosen one. You're the dreamer. You're not supposed to work or to shepherd. And so because of that, it has probably drawn a wedge between them even more. Here's what we'll read in verse 18. When they saw him at a distance, before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing. They took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. I've told you before, but the problem when a story in the Bible becomes familiar to you is it just doesn't land with the same weight. And so many of you have maybe read this story before, and you might even know the end of the story. And it really clouds how you see this moment. But I want you to picture for a moment, Joseph is on his way to meet and to join his brothers. When he's at a distance, somebody around their campfire, we have their quote, said, let's kill him. Let's say a ferocious animal did it. No one needs to know. What do you think that moment was like? Did they think he was joking? Or did they think, finally, we've all been thinking it? Did they have to sway some brothers? It seems that they had to sway Reuben. Or were they all pretty much in step? There were probably 10 brothers there that they all agree it's about time. Imagine the weight of that moment, of that decision. Not only to take anyone's life, but to take the life of your brother. There's a lot of weight in that moment. So they make a plan. And now picture it from the alternative perspective. Picture it from Joseph's. He's been on a journey. He finally sees his brothers. He knows where he's supposed to be. He may suspect that he's not going to be greeted warmly. He knows they're not close. But this, he can't expect this. He can't expect to essentially be robbed and left for dead. This is what he meets. This, unfortunately, is a theme in the book of Genesis. Brothers misbehaving. Cain and Abel, Isaac and Ishmael, even their father, Jacob and Esau. This is more along the same lines. Brothers misbehaving. Now, that doesn't let the females in the audience off the hook. It's supposed to represent something for us. How will we treat our brother, our sister? How will we treat the one that we are supposed to be close to? Reuben tries to help. He's the most admirable, but he doesn't do enough. It's as if Reuben wants to do the right thing without paying the price for doing the right thing. You've probably had this moment before in your own life, where it's obvious from the group that you're a part of, it's going to be unpopular to stand up for what's right. And so you try to stand in the middle. You try to keep one foot in your group while also being able to sleep at night, while also having some type of integrity. But it's difficult when you can see that standing up for the right thing is going to cost you something. This is, in our day and age, what we call virtue signaling. What we would really like to do is change our Facebook profile picture to stand with other people without actually having to stand with other people, without having to pay any type of price, to give of our actual resources or our time or anything like that. This is what Reuben is doing. Reuben wants to do the right thing, as he should. Reuben is the eldest brother. He's the one who should stand up and say, these are our values. These are the kind of people we're going to be. The whole sermon could be about Reuben and about when you maybe have been like him, not willing to go the full way. Will you do what's right, even if it costs you something? Reuben doesn't. So the story goes that Reuben must go off to check on the flock because they sit back down at their meal. I can't imagine what it's like. We don't know how much time has passed. We don't know if Joseph can overhear his brothers joking or sharing stories around the campfire. But after some time, some slave traders come by and they make a different plan. You know what? We'll just sell them into slavery. It's not the ultimate grievance, but it is still as if the dream is dead. The story could have turned out worse, but for all intents and purposes, they think the same result has happened. They take the news back to their father who helped light the match on this situation, and he grieves as any father would. And Jacob says, I will mourn Joseph until the day that I join him in the grave. He's not a great dad, but he does respond like any father would in this situation. One reason that Scripture is so powerful is that you are able to see yourself in the story. It's able to teach you something about your story while telling you another. And so while I am fairly confident that no one has been left for dead in a well in here, my guess is that you can see yourself in this story. My guess is that, like where it starts, that you have felt like you've been thrown in a pit before. That there have been seasons in your life that have been very difficult. That maybe due to somebody else or due to the consequences of your own self, that you have felt like you have been abandoned in a well. You may have even felt that way before, that God has left you in a well. This story does ask one question, though, of us to consider. What do you do when the people closest to you become the source of your deepest wounds? That's pretty much how it happens often, isn't it? Your deepest wounds come at the hand of those who should be offering the deepest care. And it's when that happens that you have, when they betray you, when you have the deepest wound. Look at how the text tells us this story happens. It does not say that Joseph just shows up and they beat him and they strip him naked. No, it tells us very specifically, they strip him of his coat. Very intentionally. They take the thing that's been representing their pain, the thing that has become core to his identity. He's the dreamer who's been gifted the coat of many colors. This coat that represents the heart of who he is and his future. This is what we would call betrayal. He's been betrayed by those who should be caring for him. In general, it's his older brothers, who he should be able to rely on and to lean on. And my guess is that you have experienced something similar before in your story. There's someone you thought you could trust, you thought you could count on, you thought you could lean on. It's as if you, instead, stepping out onto a firm foundation, you step out into midair when the betrayal comes. It's quite disorienting to have this moment. There was a literal moment of Joseph falling into the pit, and you have probably felt that falling before as well. One of the reasons it's so difficult is that you expect it from your enemies. There's a reason that as a Jesus person, that Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount teaches you to, he says, you have been told that to hate your enemy, but I tell you to love for your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. He only has to teach us that because the normal method is to hate your enemy. You anticipate what an enemy is going to bring you. They'll bring you pain and suffering and hatred in return. A Jesus person is taught a different way. But this is not supposed to be an enemy. In fact, when you are treated like an enemy from someone who should be close to you, that's when you experience pain the most. And so this story speaks to our story, and it asks us then to question, what do you do in the pit? Generally, there are two wrong ways that people respond to moments that are like this, to pit moments. The first is this: we respond with bitterness. We let the wound define us, this moment define us. We replay it over and over in our heads so that we're no longer the person with the dream or the person with the coat, but we're the person who's been betrayed. It becomes our identity. It becomes the new way we orient to the world out of our bitterness, out of our hurt. And it does something to us. The second response is like it. We learn to deny. We pretend that as if it never happened. We turn a blind eye to our pain. And though we have this darkness, we kind of just try to push it down. It's the kind of moment you've had when you know someone's going through something difficult. You say, how are things going? They go, it's good. As if being thrown into a pit happens every Tuesday. And it's disorienting on the other side when you go, no, you shouldn't be good because of what you've been through. We can respond in bitterness, we can respond in denial. The problem is, in both situations, you just stay in the pit. You just stay there. That becomes your new place of residing. That's where your identity comes out of, is someone who is in the pit. Now, Joseph does neither, and we'll get to that over the next few weeks. But Joseph leaves the pit. Now, this is where we find redemption. Now, one of the things we should note is that this is a story about Joseph, but it's not really a story about Joseph. The redemption that he will find doesn't come from him or his own power. It comes through who our God is. And so these brothers, they felt like they had finally killed the dream. They've killed the dream and all that it might mean for them. What they didn't realize is the dream wasn't just for Joseph. It was also for them. The dream was a gift from God, not just to him, but to the entire family. They didn't realize that they too would need this dream. Ultimately, anything from God, though, won't die in the pit. This is a dream not just for Joseph, but for God's people. And so because of that, anything that comes from God is not going to die in the pit. I think oftentimes what we see is that even in our lives, we think that all the work of God hinges upon whether or not we succeed, whether or not I do the right thing or the wrong thing. And while it's true that God works through his people, God's plans are not going to fail just because you might fail. God's plans are not going to fail just because someone might resist them, just because someone might try and take the dream down. Whatever God has in mind, God will achieve. The pit cannot stop our God. Their betrayal or your failure or their failure, nothing is going to stop the mission of God. God's purposes don't hinge upon everything going right. How often my plans might. What we see here is a little glimmer of hope at the end of this story. Verse 36, we read, "Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard." At this point, the writer of Genesis is going to cover a couple of other subjects. He's going to go away from this. But if you're reading this, meanwhile, Joseph is sold in Egypt to Potiphar, you go, well, what happens next? It's like when you're watching a TV show and it ends on a cliffhanger, and now you get to just keep watching. But back in my day, you have to wait. And you know what's happening is the reader's going, but what happens next? Because it all looks as if the dream has ended. It looks as if God's plans are coming to an end. But meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar. Joseph might think that the dream is dead. He's a slave now. He's on his way to Egypt. And the reader who understands who Egypt is probably saying, well, what is God's plan? What is God's dream up against the empire? How will this succeed? Is there any hope? The father who had not only lost a son, but he also has to believe the dream is dead. The brothers believe the threat to them is over. It's been removed. Only this single verse hints at another possibility. Meanwhile, what we cannot forget in Joseph's story is that Joseph is not the main character, but it is God working through Joseph. In your story, you can mistakenly believe that you are the main character, that it's all up to you, but the story is not about you. It's about the same God working through you. About 200 years ago, there was a guy who wanted to achieve things. He was a high-achieving person, but also he wanted to serve the people around him. And so he tried to launch a business and it failed. And a few years later, he tried to launch another business and it failed. And in the meantime, he got engaged to be married and she passed away. So he decided he would run for local office and he lost. And later he won, but he lost the first time. So then he thought he would run for Congress and he failed. He ran for Congress again and he lost again. Finally, he won, so he wanted to run for Senate, and he lost. A few years later, he lost again. And finally, after about 30 years of this journey, Abraham Lincoln was elected president of the United States of America. But somebody along the way said, hey, it's time to give up. It's time to stop. Why don't you just quit? There's easier paths in life. And so many times, it can feel like that for you. As you're thrown into a pit, as you come up upon an obstacle, as you try and orient your life to follow God and to do what he's asked you to do, because I think Joseph understood this was a dream from God. And we read in this one verse that one word that brings hope, meanwhile. Meanwhile. Today you might be in one of those pits. Life might be really difficult. Meanwhile, that same God is at work in your life. You might feel forgotten today. Meanwhile, though you may not see him, our God is close. He's with you. You may think all of your plans and your dreams, that all of your failures amount to a place that doesn't include God. And meanwhile, he made a way back to you through his Son. As we close today, we want to invite you to pray with one of our elders as they're around the room as we close. Because if you're not in a pit today, there will be a season that you do feel like you're in a pit. And today, if you feel like you've been abandoned, you've been cast into the pit, we desperately invite you to pray with one of our elders. Because sometimes it can feel so isolating, as if you're going through something that no one else has ever been through. And I promise you, if you feel like you're in the pit, somebody else has been there. And you need a brother or sister to remind you that you're not alone. That the same God that brought Joseph out of the pit, the same God that made the way for him, can make the way for you. Sometimes you need someone to walk with you. And that's where you're at today. Won't you come while we stand and sing?